Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with a very exciting video because I'm actually wrapping up my 2020 Panda palette. I have now used this for a year. I introduced this project in, I think in February, beginning of February in 2020. So I just want to kind of follow this project through and use it for a full 12 months, and that is what I have done now. So I'm gonna go through all of my progress, but before I jump into that, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. But let's just jump into where I started with this palette. So before I show you where I am now with this palette, I just wanted to go through and show you what my palette looked like when I first started this project, because this palette was basically untouched. And I also want to show you all of my progress pictures coming up until now. So I'm just going to start by showing you the slideshow of my palette from the start in February last year up until last month. So now when I've shown you all of the progress pictures from this start in February up until last update, I'm going to talk to you about where I am now. So as always, I'm going to start by inserting the picture of where the palette was last update, so you have some reference, and I'm going to skip to the side so you can see the comparison pictures. But I'm filming this about a week before my finale because I have actually used up all of the shades that I wanted to use up. I did mention before that this shade was not something that I wanted to touch because it was very similar to the other brown, and I just didn't want to focus on both of them. So that is where I am with the palette now. So with the shades that I still had left, we had this gold shade which was here left, and I used that an additional 7 times. I used it a bit in the beginning of the month, but I actually started work when using this 2 weeks ago, and in this past week, that like my first week of work, I have been actually using this gold shade every single day to do a simple kind of easy look for work, and that is how I use that shade up. So that is additional 7 uses on that gold to finish it. The next one was this warm brown right here, and with this one I actually ended up frankling this a little bit more because towards the end, when I used up the kind of contour, like the franken shade that I had down here, which I will talk about later, I just decided that I want to franken a bit more of this to kind of be sure that I finish this brown. So I did franken it, but when I did franken it, instead of kind of using that or counting that as uses on the franken shade, I did use it of, or like I added it as uses on my deep brown shade. So the uses of using it as a deepening up shade with the original brown, combined with the uses of using it as a franken shade of the, like not the franken shade that was in here, but like the re-franken shade, was 18, and that is how I used this up. And the kind of deep brown I used in the outer corner a lot. I used it, I don't think I used it as liner that much to be honest, but used in the outer corner, kind of in the lower crease, things like that. I used it quite a lot. I think I used it all over the lid as well a few times, just to kind of get the base for other shades. And that is a lot of how I used this shade up. And how I used it as a franken shade I will talk a bit more about when I get to the actual franken shade, because the franken shade I created was basically exactly the same as I've done before. So that's how I used that one up. Like I said, this deep brown I didn't really touch. I think I used it, I tallied use for about 7 months of this project, because in the beginning I didn't really tally my uses in this project, but I started doing it a few months in, and during those 7 months I only tallied 1 use in this shade. So I determined quite early on that it was a shade that I wouldn't focus on, and I haven't used it at all this past month either. Then we have the purple shade here, which I used an additional 28 times, and as you know, there was a lot of eyeshadow in here, and I just didn't really know how I would get through it. I mentioned that that was probably the shade that I was most worried about finishing, but I did finish it, as you can see. And how I did that was obviously using it on my eyes, but also using it as a blush. Someone commented that maybe you should try using it as a blush, and I was really worried about doing that because I thought it would be too deep and kind of not really look that great on my skin. but it is actually the blush that I've been using almost exclusively this past month. I felt like you have to be quite gentle with it. I usually dip my brush in here and then kind of took some off on the back of my hand before actually applying it, because it was quite pigmented, and if I applied too much it would look like a bruise. But I feel like doing it that way really worked, and if you've seen any of my past videos over the last month, I've most likely been wearing this as a blush. It was kind of that really kind of contoured, like purpley mauvey, I would say, blush. That was what I was wearing. So if you go back you can see what that looked like, because like I said, I've used it 28 times, which is most of the times that I was wearing makeup. I would say maybe max, to be honest, 5 of those uses were as eyeshadow, maybe actually a little bit more, maybe let's say 8 of those 28 were as eyeshadow and the rest was using it as a blush. So that's how I used the shade Up, and I think if I hadn't started using it as a blush, even if I used it as an eyeshadow every single day, I don't think I would have been able to finish that. So whoever suggested that tip, I can't remember your name, but whoever said try it as a blush, thank you so much, because that is how I was able to finish that eyeshadow. One more thing that I did with this shade, which I completely forgot until I looked in my notes now, I actually used this as a nail polish twice, and that definitely helped as well with the uses, because you use quite a lot of eyeshadow when you use it on your nails. I will insert a picture of what it looked like, because I do have a picture of it, and I quite liked how it turned out. I think it looked really nice, so I did that twice, and that again really helped me to finish this up. So 2 out of those 28 uses was using it as a nail polish. Then we have the last shade which I had to work on, and that was the Franken shade down here. The uses that I'm mentioning now are just that Franken shade, not the Franken shade that I made with that deep shade, as I explained before. And I only used that Franken shade that you can see in the progress pictures an additional 5 times before I finished it, so that was quite early on in the month, and that is also why I decided to re-Franken a bit more of that deep brown, to just have a bit more of that Franken shade, because I knew that was a way that I could use it. I used it on my eyes, I used it as kind of like a bronzer, kind of contour shade hybrid. Again, if you see me wear bronzer over the last, like, I would say like the first 3 weeks of since the last update, that was most likely that shade, because that's how I used it the most. And with that last 5 uses of that shade, I actually completed the palette. As you can see, I did finish the Franken shade first. The second shade I finished was the gold shade. The next one I finished was the deep brown, and then lastly I finished this purple shade about 2 days ago, but granted I am pre-filming this a week in advance. It's currently Sunday and I'm this going up on Friday next week. So there you guys is my Panda palette finale for 2020. This is probably my most successful Panda palette so far. I do have 1 shade left which I didn't finish, but I actually finished up all of the shades that I wanted to focus on, which is really great, and I'm so proud of myself that I got through this palette, because as you saw when I showed you the slideshow, this palette was basically brand new when I introduced it. So I'm very proud of myself, and I'm happy to now retire this palette and declutter it. I'm not going to bother using the shade Up or depotting it or anything, because I have so many deep browns like this in my collection. If it was a formula that I absolutely adored, I probably would try, but it is a decent formula, but it's not anything special, and because of that reason I have decided to use declutter that shade and let it go. But this palette is not going to go into my empties bin for this year. For my actually empties though, I'm only counting the shades that I finished this year into my numbers, which is the gold, the deep brown, and the purple one down here. But that, you guys, was it for today's finale. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and my Panda palette update 1 for 2021 will be my next video going up, I believe, and that will obviously be my Panda palette that I will continue for this year. So we'll continue having a Panda palette video go up every single month for 2021 as well. But if you did like this, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and otherwise I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye guys!